Okay, hi everyone, welcome to tutorial number 2. On the first tutorial I showed you the basics of Effect House, what each of the different windows on Effect House meant, how to add something into your scene and interact with it through a click event, and then how to position things around the screen and how to add different textures. So I'm going to extend from that, and what I want to do here is choose a random image, show you some additional components and maybe move stuff around the screen. So in the first tutorial, I showed you how to add an image with some texture, and when you click on that, it removes it from the screen and adds a texture to something else. So now what I want to do is I want to show you how to choose a random texture for this image. So this is good when you have some sort of a randomizer or you want to do different things based on how someone interacts with the screen. So I'm going to add a couple more textures in here. I'm going to add in a couple of different, say up to number 10. So here you can see I just have 1 to 10 here. So I'm going to change the name of this. The naming doesn't really matter, but it just allows you to kind of keep track, especially when you have multiple different scene objects. I'm going to just change that because then it's quite easy to follow things. So you can see here what I'm doing is once I tap this number 2, I'm going to assign number 6. But what I want to do now is I want to choose a random number between 1 and 10. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to change this a small bit, change this around. So I'm going to, the very first thing I want to do is I want to remove number 2. So as soon as I click number 2, I just want to remove it. So that's the very first thing that I want to do. I just change them around a small bit and nothing's happening because I'm after removing the connector here. But now what I want to do is I want to generate a random number. So there is a random option here. You can see random. And if I zoom in, you can see it gives me a min value and a max value. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go between min 1 and I'm going to go between 10. Right, so this gives me a random number between 1 and 10. Now a quick trick, what I like to do here is I like to go to 10.99. The reason why is because if you think about a random number between 1 and 10, if you want 10 to be chosen, you have only one option, which is 10. But if you want 1 to be chosen, you have any number between 1, 1.01, all the way up to 1.99. So you essentially have 100 different options for 1 to be chosen here. But because the max was 10.00, I've only one option there. So to try and keep things even, this is what I generally do is I give a number between the base 0.00 of the lowest number and 0.99 of the max value, and then I floor that. So what flooring does is it brings it back down to the base number. So this will then give me a number, a random number. You can see here that it's generating a random number between 1 and 10.99. So any random number between them. And then when I floor that, it just brings that back down to the whole number. This is good when I want to specifically check those whole numbers. You can also use that random number if you want, but because I want an action to happen based on a number outcome, I want to check to see is that number 1, 2, 3. I don't want to have to check, which I can do. I can check to see if that number is between 1 and 2 or between 2 and 3. I can do that as well. But just to keep it simple, I floor this number. So the output of this, and I'll show you a quite handy trick here as well. There's a peak option, and this peak just gives you a look at what the output will be. So you can see here it's a whole number because I floored it, that results in a whole number. So the output will always be a random number, a random whole number between 1 and 10. And this is the number that I'm going to use to check to see which texture should be applied. So I'm going to get rid of this peak for now. Again, that's a handy number if you just want to check that your logic is correct in what you're doing. I now want to check to see what that number is. Now there's a couple of different ways you can do this. I'm going to do it the long way for now, just to kind of show you a couple of different components. So there's the if, and there's also a switch, right? So I'm going to do a switch for the moment, right? And then I'll do it a different way just to show you how you can connect some of these components. So a switch takes a specific index, which is going to be the index I want between 1 and 10, which is the one that I'm generating here. So now I have a number that's coming into the switch, that I know is going to be between 1 and 10. Again, I want to connect these the next event up to the switch. So I know once I click number 2, 2 disappears, it's going to go into this switch event. Now you can see on the output of this switch event, it actions something based on the index that's coming in. So you can see I have an index coming in between 1 and 10. So what I need to do now is I need to hook up these indexes, right? So what I want to do here is, if the index is 1, it'll never be 0 because we've said it's going to be between 1 and 11. You can add in 0 if you want, if you have a 0 image, but we have an image between 1 and 10, so we're going to just use 1 and 10. So we're going to leave 0 empty, which means, you know, we know because we've put the input into this that 0 won't be possible. So when 1 is shown, I want the number 1 texture to be assigned to the random number. So if that random number happens to be 1, 1 will be assigned. And then what I need to do is I just need to duplicate this for each of the other ones. Now you can see sometimes there's a lot of duplication here, and there's quicker ways that you can do this, which I can kind of go through and show you a little bit later on. But this is the basics of how you piece things together. So I'm just going to hook these elements up for now, which is if that random number happens to be 1, 2, 3, or 4, I want to connect these and associate with them the correct numbers. So if this is number 2, I can drag number 2 across, if it's number 3, and if it's number 4. So now when I start this, when I click this, because we've only connected 1 to 4, if this random number happens to be between 1 and 4, it'll be changed the texture here. Now, it didn't happen to be 1 to 4, so nothing happened. So we're going to go again and try it. So there you see we just happened to be number 2, which is great. But the reason why nothing showed there at the very beginning was because one of the numbers that came out from the random generator must have been above 4. So in order just to kind of complete this out, I'm just going to add in the rest of the components. So I'm just going to duplicate all of these and connect them all together, just to show you what it's going to be like, and making sure that regardless of what the outcome is, that we're going to have some sort of a number. So I just need to connect all of these up. I generally like connecting them all up at the beginning and then going through and setting the correct values of each of them. So you can see here there's just a bit of connecting up. So now I have, regardless of what number comes in between 1 and 10, I have something associated with each of those different values, right? So I'm just going to try that back up here just to keep it safe. So when 1 comes in, it's going to set it to 1, 2, 3, 4. So now we just need to kind of finish this off. So 5 comes in, I'm going to set the texture to 5. 6, set the texture to 6. I didn't include 7, so I'm going to put that actually just to keep it great. I'm going to add 7. So I forgot to add in 7 originally. So we still have 6, 7, 8, 9. So all I'm doing here is just making sure that the correct texture number is associated with the number that's coming in here. So when I click this, 4 was a random number that was generated. We click it again, 7. So here it's just picking a random number between 1 and 10 and then associating that texture assigned to it. So that's a nice way that you can do random things and display different random images. So, you know, you might want someone to choose, you know, a specific option, whether it's the best food or the favorite football or the favorite, you know, color, whatever it is, and then do something based on what that is, or just generate a random number and ask someone to interact or tell a story around it. So this is good for that specific thing. Now I use the switch, but what I can also do is use ifs, if and else, right? So what I'm going to do is just disconnect this switch for the moment. And what I'm going to do here is I am going to create a subgraph and show you what the subgraph does. So I have a piece of functionality that I want to just group into a nice little block that doesn't take up any space, that I can just use here, and then I can, you know, say what you want. You can call it something. So I'm going to call this to be switch functionality, right? Now within here, you can see once I go in, I now have an input and I have an output somewhere hidden here behind here. An input and an output. So this allows me to control when I want to go into this piece of functionality and when I want to come out. So when you click the plus button on the input, you can see here I have an execution node. This means that it allows me to connect this to some sort of piece of functionality, right? When I come back out, you can see this now has an input option. So again, I just want to keep things connected. I can hook this up, which means, you know, this piece of switch functionality is connected again. So when I click this, it's going to give me a random texture. If I disconnect it, sometimes these can be a little bit tricky to get. There you go. So now nothing's going to happen other than the two disappear because I have disconnected this, right? So I'm going to just leave that switch functionality up here for the moment. I'm going to show you the if functionality. So here is essentially what that switch is doing behind the scenes. So that switch block is doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes, which is essentially checking what number is coming in and doing something specific. So we can use the same thing for the if. So I'm going to connect up the if, and I'm going to connect what I want to check. So I want to check if that value is equal. So this is the random number. So if that random number is equal to 1, so I'm going to just check the very first thing. I want to set the texture. So I'm going to do this again. Set the texture of the random number to be 1. But because I'm using an if, this will only work if it's 1. So now what I need to do is have another if block that checks all the different things. So you can see here, if the random number is 1 and it's true, so if the random number is 1, do something. If it's false, I want to check if it's 2. And you have to connect all of these blocks again together. You can see each time you create a new block, you have to connect that number. So if that number now is equal to 2, I'm going to connect the 2 block. Now you have to do this all the way down for every single number. So I'm just going to do the force forward again here just to kind of show you what it's like. I just duplicated the blocks. Make sure to connect all the inputs correctly. So I want to check that random number is equal to 1, 2, 3, and 4. The false is connected to each of the next ones because it's down here. And if it's 1, if it's 2, if it's 3, if it's 4, I'm only going to do 4 for now, and I'm going to show you that if it's not 4, we're going to do something else. So if it's not 4, so if it's any number 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, we're just going to set one of the built-in textures for now, which is the bling, just to show you what it's like. So now what should happen is, if we're happy, or if we happen to have a generated random number between 1 and 4, it's going to give the number 1 to 4 texture on it. If it's not 1 to 4, we're going to go bling. So 1 was the random number, 1 was the random number again, bling. So a random number that was above 4 came in and it was bling. So again, just to show you that, you know, obviously another random number above 4, 3. So that's completely random. So that's how you can connect things together through if and else's. So what I want to do now is just show you a little bit else about what could be done, right? So again, I'm just going to group, well, I'll actually leave that there for now, right? So what I want to do now is show you how you can move things around the screen, right? So when I get that random number, I want to now move that up and down, right? Just to show you some of these games where you see something is moving and you have to stop it at a specific position. This is all done using kind of these components. So what I want to do now is just show you another couple of components. So there's a weight component, which is nice because you know, if you want to wait a couple of seconds or do things at different intervals, you can use these wait blocks. So what I'm going to do for now is I'm just going to connect the output of each of these up to a wait block, which means that once the texture changes on any of those textures, I'm just going to wait for a second. I just want to wait an extra second just so nothing happens all the time and like one after the other. And then there's a transit block. So again, you know, you become familiar with these blocks the more you use it. When I started, I didn't know any of these blocks existed. You know, you get to know which blocks you want to use most often. The more effects you create, the better you become familiar with these, right? So I'm going to connect the output of that wait second. So I'm going to wait 1 second and then I'm going to come into this transit, right? So with this transit, what it allows you to do is go from one thing to another over a period of time. So what I want to do is I'm going to take this random number and I'm going to move it up and down the screen, right? So you can see here the position is a X and Y value. It's not a number, it's an X and Y. So you can click this down, drop down, and it gives you options. Effect 2 means that there's 2 values associated with something, right? So if I change this to effect 2, you now see that the from is from an X and Y value to an X and Y value, right? So that's what I want to use because I want to set the position, and the position is an X and Y value, right? So I want to go from the current position, which is 0, 0, and I want to go, say, I can choose whatever I want. So I'm going to do 100 in the X and I'm going to do 250 in the Y. So this should go up to the top right hand corner, and I'm going to say over the duration of 1 second. It's going to take 1 second to go from 0, 0, which is your default starting point center of the screen, up to 100 in the X and 250 in the Y. So the width of your screen is 720. So you can see here the size. So this is a good thing to note, is that the size of this screen is essentially 720 pixels wide and 1280 pixels height, right? So if you're centered in the center, 0, 0, you have 360 to the left, 360 to the right. You have 640 to the top and 640 to the bottom. So if we're going 100 to the right, we're going about a third of the way to the right of the screen from the center point. And if we're going 250, we're going about a third of the way up as well. So it should go kind of somewhere up to the top right hand corner-ish, and it'll take 1 second to go there. The interpolator here then tells you whether you want it just to go straight and back, or if you wanted to kind of go slow, start off slowly and kind of go in a more melodic way. You can use the different options here depending on the functionality that you want. You can play around with these. The loop, so if you just want it to happen one time, so if you wanted to go from one place to another and stay there, you set that to 1 because you only wanted to loop once. And then ping pong says, do you want it to come back that way? So we're going to leave these as these options for now and have a look at the output. So this is the fourth time we've seen multiple different outputs for a specific piece of functionality. Normally there's just one piece of output. So you can see here next. But because there's a couple of things here that this block takes care of, we can do something once it begins. So as this starts, in terms of the transit, as the movement starts, you might want to do something. So you can set and hook this up to something, and you can say, right, I want to do something once this starts. The stay means every single iteration I want to do something, and then there's an end block, which means once it's finished, I want to do something. So these are handy ways in which you can interact based on the different piece of functionality you want. If you want to find out a little bit more, there's a little I button here, and this will give you a little bit more information about, you know, the inputs, if you want when it starts, if you want to pause it, resume, stop, and then also the outputs. Again, the ping pong, the interpolator shows you a bit of information about them and this. So if you don't quite know, have a look at this, and then also have a look at the Effect House resources section as well. So what I want to happen here is during that 1 second of going from 0, 0 up to the top right hand corner-ish, I want to set the position of this. So I want to move that block, the random number, up there. I don't want it to happen when it begins because this is only called once. When it ends is when it ends. So, you know, I can do whatever I want after that. But I want to just move it. So this stay block, as I said, stay output, happens at every iteration. And then this current effect2 gives you that position. So from to, so at each frame, it'll give you that number that is generated during that frame. So by connecting this together, what will happen is it's going to take 1 second to go from one position to another, and at every single frame I'm connecting that and moving this random block. So now when I click this, it should give a random number between 1 and 4 or the bling, wait 1 second, and then move from the center point up to the top right hand corner. So let's see, does it work? Right, so that's exactly what we wanted. Now, as you see, it's only happening once. So if I do ping pong, now what will happen is it'll go up and then back down, right? If I change the duration, it'll be slower going up and down. If I change the interpolation to be ease in and out, it should slowly start and work its way up. I'm going to change this to 3 seconds just for the moment, just so you can see the slow start. And then it speeds up and slows down. So you can see it's more of a swing action. And then looping, I'm just going to put this to be, this is what I generally do, is 9,999, which just means it's going to keep on going. So you can see now. So the end block now won't be called until this finishes. So say, for example, we want this to happen 3 times. And then when the 3 times is over, we want to make that block disappear. So we know that there's a set visibility. We know that there's an option here to do something when it ends. And then we can pull down the random number here, which means once it does something 3 times, we want to set the visibility to 0. So we wait 1 second, it goes up and down, that's once, that's twice, and this time it should disappear. So this is essentially how you connect everything together. You can check using a switch or an if and else, depending on which ones you want. There's other ways in which you can do this as well, which are a little bit more advanced, by adding in an array and checking and looping through an array, which I can show you afterwards as well. But this is essentially the basics of, getting something random, setting a value, waiting, and then moving something over a period of time. So you can piece all of these things together and see what happens. So that's tutorial number 2. Hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're learning, and we'll move on to a little bit more complex functionality straight after this on tutorial number 3. Thanks for watching. Good luck.